the line actually between consumer devices and medical devices is continuing to get much more blurry. So we're seeing these products that are called software as a medical device, where a specific feature within a consumer device is passing some sort of regulatory clearance. And I think that's a space where we'll continue to see the lines between healthcare and consumer devices continue to blur. And it's important that we really work together and bridge that divide. Otherwise, we're going to be, creating insights in the wearable device, and then they're going to be falling flat in the healthcare space. So making sure that there are pathways and that healthcare providers understand the data that we're producing and the limitations and the strengths of the data, and so that they can incorporate that into their clinical practice is super important.
New choices, new players, new models of care. Consumer first healthcare is everywhere. For us to build the future, to see what's new, we gotta look at the world from a different point of view. Consumer innovation ain't going away. I say it's here to stay. Today it leads the way. We gotta drop the silos. We're all the same team. Experience, business, tech, and marketing. So join us now. Join the revolution. Consumer first health is the evolution. Status quo or like status no. Yeah, this is the healthcare rap. Yo, come on, let's go.
Welcome back to the leading podcast about consumer-centered healthcare. What if healthcare was actually centered around what consumers need and expect? We're talking with leaders who are making it happen one experience at a time. I'm Jared Johnson, and this is episode 398. Today, we have the Flava of the week about Hinge Health's latest research. What does their data tell us about the value of virtual PT? And are we still underestimating the significance of convenience when it comes to digital offerings? I'll talk about that. Then we welcome Torey Lee from Whoop to talk about the intersection between wearables and functional health, Whoop's new step tracking feature, and how the line between healthcare and consumer devices is getting thinner. It's time for the awesomeness. Are y'all ready? Let's go.
Flava of the week.
Hinge Health's latest report makes the case that virtual physical therapy with its consumer-centered model leads to greater results and patient adherence. Ever since Amazon announced Hinge Health as their first MSK partner in December, I've been looking to get to know them better. And their latest research report does just that, as well as gives insights into consumer-centered physical therapy and other virtual specialty care. Let's dive into some of the findings and then explore consumer-centered traits of virtual physical therapy. The opportunity for virtual PT is well stated in the report. Physical therapy is widely accepted as the recommended first-line treatment for most MSK issues, but fewer than 1 in 10 people in the US gets PT annually, according to an analysis of health claims data. Research shows that 3/4 of people who get a PT referral never see a therapist. 3/4. Simply put, PT is often inconvenient and expensive. Consider the common path to traditional PT. You get a referral, you find a provider, schedule a visit, arrange childcare or transportation, wait days or weeks for the visit, schedule a second visit, rinse and repeat. By contrast, digital care solutions use mobile apps that can enable immediate access to treatment. Wait times for PT vary by such factors as location and insurance, but on average, it can take more than 2 weeks for someone with MSK pain to start PT after getting a referral. Digital solutions remove location from the equation by offering virtual visits, so a patient's proximity to care isn't an issue anymore. To achieve outcomes with conservative care, namely pain reduction, surgery prevention, and cost savings, people must stick with the treatment. Yet, adherence to traditional PT is low. One study found that 57% of people did not follow their PT program, with 32% stopping early due to logistical and accessibility issues. Other research shows non-adherence can reach up to 70%. Convenience greatly impacts PT adherence. When it's far, hard to schedule, or costly, consistency drops. Less obvious are psychological barriers such as habit building, fear of movement, and mental health challenges. Research shows that 52% of people with chronic pain say that pain lowers their motivation. Traditional fragmented healthcare systems struggle with helping people with these issues. Digital solutions help by integrating physical therapists, health coaches, and engaging, motivating technology. Okay, so what's the outcome here? With traditional care, the median wait time is 14 days after a referral to start PT among low back pain patients. With Hinge Health, on the other hand, the average wait time is 4.8 days to see a PT in a digital MSK clinic. So 14 days compared to 4.8 days, let's just round that up to 5. Further, only 24% of people who get a traditional PT referral ever see a therapist, while 67% of Hinge Health members start their program the same day they enroll. Okay, so I'd say say there is enough here in this report to keep talking about. If anything, this is one of the latest validations that digital offerings for certain types of specialty care offer greater convenience and result in higher patient adherence. Those seem like positives in my book, and with a reported medical expense of $382 billion for MSK treatments, we'll be sure to pay more attention to this space moving forward. Let's not forget the significance of convenience with digital offerings as we consider how to design and market consumer-centered products and services. That's another way that we'll build the healthcare of tomorrow, and that's the Flava of the Week.
The flow.
All right, everyone, let's get into the flow. Welcome back, Zane. How have things been? It's a new year.
Hey, Jared. Good. Yeah, I'm excited. 2025 has kicked off with a boom. I think one of the last times we were together was our prediction episode, and some of our predictions are coming to pass, so that's exciting. And then depending on when this episode drops, the Vibe is only in a couple weeks, so I'm excited to see you in person again, and then also hang out with some of our friends down in Nashville. So it's been a great start to the year, that's for sure.
Fantastic. So we're going to have Torey Lee on here from Whoop today. What do you hope to hear from Torey?
Well, I'm a huge fan of years ago on the podcast, we started to talk about how we believe that connected fitness will be the future of digital health. I think that's proving out. And so I'm excited to see what Torey can share about what Whoop is doing today and where they see themselves going, and even just get her thoughts as a healthcare leader on where this part of the industry might connect to more of the clinical side of the industry where we're more familiar with. And so it should be an exciting show.
Love it. All right. Well, let's dig right in. Torey, we want to welcome you to the podcast. Torey Lee is the Director of Data Science and Research at Whoop. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks, Zane, for having me. It's great to be here. I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's hit it right now. Can you help our listeners get to know you a little bit better? Let's give them like maybe a 2-minute version of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, definitely. So as you said, I'm the Director of Data Science and Research here at Whoop. I'm super passionate about the intersection of health and technology, specifically how we can empower people with data, wearable data, but really all kinds of data to better understand their bodies and navigate their healthcare. My background is in applied math and public health. And I love the role that I have here at Whoop because it allows me to combine those two passions and background on a daily basis. My team here at Whoop, the data science and research team, we're responsible for developing, many of the algorithms that power the Whoop experience. So if you're familiar with Whoop, the recovery score, the strain score, sleep staging, stress score. So we build a lot of those scores. We also build a lot of machine learning models. So, if you've ever worn Whoop, you know that we detect activities and we can even classify them. So we might know when you're running or know when you're playing soccer. And then my team is also at the forefront of a lot of cutting edge wearable research. So we're exploring how wearable data can be used for early illness detection. We published a paper a couple of years ago on identifying COVID infections. And I think we'll get into this a little bit later on the podcast, but we recently published a paper on how physiological metrics from a wearable device, so things that everyone's familiar with, resting heart rate variability, how they vary across the menstrual cycle, and some interesting insights that we were able to extract from that data.
Yeah, we're going to dive into that here in a moment. This is so true. I think we keep looking back, Zane and I do, about what has changed since we started kind of shining a spotlight on this intersection of things like wearables and the data that comes from them and clinical care and other digital health services and solutions out there. What about Whoop in particular? What else would be helpful for listeners to know? I know I guess nearly all, if not all, are familiar with the basics, but what's helpful for them to know? Yeah,
so, if you've never heard of Whoop, it's a wearable device. So you might be familiar with Apple Watch or Fitbit. The thing that differentiates Whoop, it's similar to some of the other wearable devices in that we don't have a screen. So our sole focus is really on delivering insights. And we like to say not distractions. So we're not going to ping you with emails or text messages. It's really all about this sort of health and wellness focus. I think there's also a common perception of Whoop being for elite athletes. Our foundations really were in professional athletes, collegiate athletes. But I do think Whoop really is designed to help anyone who wants to better understand their health and sleep and fitness. And, even my parents are Whoop wearers for the last, I think, 6 years now. And they're obsessed with the insights that they get. We can chat about one story where my dad used Whoop to navigate healthcare. He was experiencing acute respiratory illness and couldn't really find the care that he needed. And Whoop really empowered him to continue to go back to healthcare providers and say, I think something's wrong. He was experiencing symptoms at the time, and the Whoop data really backed up his experience and empowered him to ask more questions.
That's powerful. That's a one-on-one personalized version of what Whoop is all about. So yeah, amazing there. Let's start kind of big picture, and then we definitely want to dive into the paper you mentioned and then some of the more technical aspects of what allows those insights to be served up. Just wearables in general, I'd say, where do you see them? I'm fascinated with, I feel like they're in a better place than they've ever been. I've been following them for a long time. Zane's been following them for forever.
Agree.
Not like as users, but also just industry wide. We both come from clinical care provider side at some point in our careers. And we just see this intersection, like it's full of opportunities. So like big picture, where do you see wearables fitting into the future of where healthcare is going?
Yeah, it's a great question. Wearables have come a long way over the past, few decades. I think previously they were really thought of as step counters, and the capabilities of wearables have just expanded hugely. And, how I see them fitting into healthcare, I love to think, people say the P's of healthcare. So healthcare is becoming more personalized, participatory, preventative, predictive. I think wearables are really embodying a lot of those characteristics already, and I think they can really help bridge some of those gaps in healthcare. So if we want to walk through some of those examples, so personalized, I think this is a huge, huge advantage for wearables. For example, on a yearly basis, you might go see your primary care physician, and they're going to take your heart rate. And in a clinical setting, anything between 60 and 100 beats per minute for your heart rate is considered normal. But you might have a 65 BPM heart rate one year and then 95 BPM the next year. And if you've ever worn a wearable device, you know that a 30 beats per minute increase in your resting heart rate is something's going on in your body there. And it doesn't necessarily mean that something's wildly wrong. It could be something acute, like it could have been, you exercised close to bedtime, or even you were drinking or partying the night before, you didn't get enough sleep. But if your baseline is really shifting 30 beats per minute, that's something to pay attention to. And so I think this personalized baseline that wearables create, so you can track these subtle deviations or even big deviations, and having that sort of consistent record day over day, filling in the gaps between your yearly visits is huge. And I'm happy to go into the other P's of healthcare where I think wearables can play huge roles, if that's something you guys want to keep talking about.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, maybe one comment for me, like everything you've said so far totally resonates with me. And so I think for my own life, like I used to be pretty out of shape and decided to get a Fitbit, and just because it's the only one I knew back in the day. I don't think Whoop was around then, or I just didn't really know about it. And to your point, I had no idea what my base numbers were. And back then, Fitbit was really just a step counter, calorie counter. And I had no idea. And so having that dashboard really helped me personally get into what I am currently in the best shape of my life. But then another anecdote, I was recently last year, up skiing in Colorado, and I get bad altitude sickness. And of course, my Fitbit started to ring and say, hey, your beats per minute is way, way, way too high. And so it was really cool just to see, these tools they're actually working. And sure enough, I wasn't feeling great. And once I came back down to altitude, it was great. And so I think that whole concept of having that personalized baseline is huge for giving people back agency and starting to personalize care. And so maybe with that, I'll turn it back to you. Tell us about the other P's.
Yeah, totally. Just going off of that was the whole thing for my dad as well, as he established this baseline of respiratory rate on his wearable device. And he developed this illness and was developing all of these symptoms. And he could just see his respiratory rate climbing on Whoop. And it was in the time of COVID. And so he kept going to doctors, and doctors would say, I think you're fine. Like, you're super healthy for your age. Everything seems normal. You don't have COVID. But he could see something was off because he knew this baseline. And that really helped sort of empower him to keep seeking out care when he knew something was off in his body. Moving on, this is one that I think about a lot, is like, how do we make health engaging for folks? And, that's a huge trend in healthcare right now. And we're seeing patient portals, telehealth services, all of these different aspects to healthcare pop up to try and make it more engaging and more participatory. And this is really like, the bread and butter of wearables. Like the whole experience around wearables is creating engaging experiences that people want to come back to day over day. And so I think this is another place where wearables can help bridge this gap between healthcare and sort of a consumer space of how do we get people to care more about their health? How do we get people to engage with their health on a daily basis?
Love that. Love that. Well, I know on my end, my wearable is connected to my Strava account. And so when I'm out there mountain biking, I'm always trying to beat this one buddy in my bike club. He's just so fast. I just can't beat him. But it's definitely made it fun and exciting to get out.
Yeah, I've got a couple more P's for you. So preventative. I think this is where wearables and the healthcare industry really need to bridge a gap or come together here. So wearables tend to be highly sensitive to things, but not super specific. And so what I mean by that is wearables often can tell you that something is going wrong or something's off. So in your example, at altitude, maybe your resting heart rate is elevated or your respiratory rate is elevated. But without a lot of extra context, and maybe GPS would help in that case, and you could tell that you're at altitude, but not always can we figure out exactly and pinpoint what's going on there. So I think this is where sort of wearables and healthcare meet in the middle, where wearables can say, we have these super personalized baselines, we're collecting data day in, day out, and we can tell that something's off, but we really need that high fidelity diagnostic equipment from the medical space, from the healthcare space, to sort of close the loop and figure out exactly what's going on there. So I think in this way, we can sort of get healthcare to push forward in that preventative space and say, something's wrong here, but let's use the traditional healthcare tools to really figure out what that is.
These are good. Okay, so personalized, participatory, preventive.
Yeah, my last one, I wrote some notes on this because I love the P's of healthcare. So predictive. This is the last one I think is super cool. So there's a lot of really rapid innovation happening right now in terms of using, foundational models, which is basically how ChatGPT works. So there's these really large pre-trained models. You give it a lot of unlabeled data. It learns sort of what's normal, what's noise, what's sort of irregular, and you can fine-tune these models for specific use cases. So in the wearable space, there's a lot of foundational models that are being created on ECG, so electrocardiogram, that's measuring the heart signals, or PPG, that's photoplethysmography, that's measuring sort of blood flow underneath your skin. And you can create these really massive data sets and train these large models to detect subtle changes in this physiology. And these models are now being applied towards 10, 20-year risk stratification for cardiovascular disease, for long-term health outcomes. And so it's sort of suggesting that there are these subtle changes in wearable signals and sort of physiological signals that can help stratify risk 10, 20 years down the line. And so I think this is a really sort of untapped space that we're going to, with the explosion of ChatGPT, with the explosion of all of these, GPU-based models, we're going to see a lot of investment in this area.
I think that's music to our ears. As recently at a conference, Torey and one of the health leaders got up there and took a bearish perspective towards wearables, which I totally disagreed with. And as you sit here and chat, what's going through my head is I don't think a lot of legacy health system leaders who are primarily our guests here or who listen to our podcast fully appreciate just how far along these wearables have innovated, right? In the pre-show, we mentioned we had Oura Ring on the show as well. They're doing some wonderful things all within the same space. And like these tools now, to your point, maybe they're not super high fidelity like you'd get in an emergency room or in the surgical suite. But to me, I would think they're good enough to at least give clinicians some insight to then start to help work with their patients to take action. And I've noticed there's a few health systems and even some very progressive wellness clinics who are finally starting to accept that these tools exist. And instead of shaming or laughing at patients when they come in with these, call it self-reported data, they view that as a highly engaged patient or customer and build on it. And so I'm just excited to see where y'all are going to go with all of this.
I totally agree. I think, whenever someone's engaging with their health, whether that's with a wearable device or journaling their symptoms with pen and paper, we should embrace that and celebrate that as a moment to really embrace this participatory direction for healthcare. So I totally agree.
Love it. Wanted to ask Torey about your role specifically, and I'll confess that I barely slid through math in high school and undergrad. And so I could never be in your role and probably don't envy your role, but I know it's super important. But would love to know, what does your day-to-day look like as head of, data and research? Data science and research.
It's super varied. My role on a day-to-day, I would say the bulk of it, when I'm directly working with the team is we are prepping data sets, we're training models. So it's a lot of, the unglamorous parts of data science, which is data cleaning and data piping and making sure everything's in the right place. And then we're doing a lot of model training. So we're cleaning the data and then we're developing different types of models. So this can be as simple as, you might have heard in your high school stats class, like a linear regression is a type of model. And then there's all sorts of much more complicated models that have layers of activation functions. And we can go into the deep sort of nitty gritty of that, but I'll sort of leave that abstractly right now. And then a lot of what we're doing is working really closely with product managers and software developers to actually bring these algorithms into the application and see sort of how Whoop members are exploring this, reacting to this, what information is useful, what's not useful, what's resonating. So it's sort of that whole pipeline of collecting data, collecting a lot of ground truth data, developing these models, and then deploying them into the back end and seeing how members react.
Yeah, there's a lot to that. And I think will be really interesting is to think about this application of it that you mentioned early on. Maybe we can dive into this about a recent paper that Whoop published. Is about using Whoop data to measure changes in cardiovascular parameters during the menstrual cycle. Tell us about that. I mean, it's fascinating. Yeah,
it was super cool research. So again, started with cleaning the data. So we had 45,000 menstrual cycles recorded on Whoop from 11,000 different people. And first, we started just processing the data and we confirmed things that are pretty well established. So, the cardiovascular parameters, so resting heart rate and heart rate variability, they fluctuate with the menstrual cycle. So in the follicular phase, which is the first half of the menstrual cycle, your resting heart rate tends to decrease and your heart rate variability tends to increase. And then that kind of flips at the end of the cycle in the luteal phase. Your resting heart rate is higher and your HRV is lower. So this was pretty well established, but one thing that we wanted to explore here was how much do these things fluctuate and does that actually matter? So people know that the length of your menstrual cycle or the regularity of the length of your menstrual cycle is a really key metric for hormonal health. We hadn't looked at before whether this variation in these cardiovascular parameters, which we called cardiovascular amplitude, was also an important metric. And so we found that individuals who are using hormonal birth control, which obviously influences your underlying hormones, had this dampened cardiovascular amplitude. So their resting heart rate and HRV didn't fluctuate as much throughout the menstrual cycle compared to those who were naturally cycling, which was this really interesting insight because, we know that there are hormonal differences. Your hormonal profile when you're on birth control is pretty steady throughout the whole cycle. And then you might have a placebo week where your hormones sort of return to their naturally cycling levels. But it sort of was affirming that, this metric that we were measuring on a wearable device reflected what we might expect to see in the hormonal profile throughout the menstrual cycle. And the second interesting finding was that we also saw that in older individuals, they tend to have more dampened cardiovascular amplitude. So again, their resting heart rate and HRV didn't fluctuate as much throughout the menstrual cycle compared to younger individuals. And as you approach perimenopause, menopause, we know that there are underlying hormonal profile changes that are happening. So we sort of hypothesize here, we still have to collect a lot more data and directly connect it to these hormonal measures. But we're hypothesizing here that this wearable data could be a useful metric for tracking hormonal health over time.
It's amazing.
That's fantastic. I would guess, and I realize you probably can't confirm or deny, but I would guess under that huge data set, there's some really interesting and progressive things that y'all have found that you probably can't necessarily yet go out and tell the public or build a product around yet, but I'm sure the data's there.
We're continuing to do research on this data set and try and get information to individuals in less invasive ways and more convenient ways. A wearable is pretty easy to just put on your wrist or your finger or wherever it is for a long period of time and not really think about it. So if we can deliver these insights to people about their hormonal health or their cardiovascular health without them having to do much, that's a great step forward for us.
I wanted to ask Torey, since you guys don't have a screen, so I'm thinking about the wearable I use. I have to select when I'm doing a certain workout or whatever, and it starts track. But my understanding is that Whoop can, automatically know if you're running or maybe playing hockey or skiing or whatever. How does that happen in layman's terms?
Let's start with the data that's coming directly off the strap to sort of establish a foundation here. So if you look at the back of your sensors, you'll typically see sort of a green or a red light that's shining. So this is called an LED, light emitting diode. Then there's also what's called photodiodes, which you can think of as a tiny little camera that's measuring the amount of light that's bouncing back. And so the LED shines a little light against your skin, and the the photodiode measures what's reflected back. And when your heart beats, the volume of blood that's going through the small little capillaries at the right near the surface of your skin is changing, and that is absorbing more light. And so from this photodiode and this LED, we can actually extract heart rate. So that's one of the main signals that we're using from the strap to identify periods of activity. There's also other sensors like accelerometers that are tracking motion, or gyroscopes that are tracking orientation of the device, and thermometers, tiny little thermometers that are tracking your skin temperature. And with all of this data that's coming off of the strap, we're sort of packaging this data up into periods of time and extracting insights from it using what we call ground truth data. So with Whoop, we'll have years and years of people labeling their activities for us. So they told us, I was playing soccer here, or I was running here. And what we can do is we can train this supervised machine learning model where it's connecting the data that's coming off of the Whoop strap or whatever wearable to that ground truth label that we have. So we know that you're running in this instance. And so when you think about it, if you think about sort of what is the typical motion profile of running, you think, okay, it's very repetitive. There might be a little bit of up and down motion. The heart rate is going to be pretty steady throughout the duration of the activity. Maybe you're doing some sprint intervals, so it goes up and down. And then compare that with soccer, where there's going to be sort of bursts of extreme intense activity followed by sort of more periods of rest or recovery. There might be some of that cyclic motion still in there, but it's a lot more erratic. And so we can train these machine learning algorithms to really understand what does soccer look like from the Whoop strap worn on the wrist, or what does running look like, or what does ice hockey look like. And that's sort of how it all works, is we take these mass data sets where either, the members are labeling the data for us, or we're going out and collecting gold standard clinical ground truth data, pairing that with the Whoop data, and then training these supervised machine learning algorithms to estimate those labels.
That's fantastic. It makes me realize that as much as humans want to claim that we're all unique in our own way, there's really some things that are all the same.
There's some pieces of it that are personalized. So, we might know for Zane that he tends to run for an hour from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Mondays or something like that, or that someone else is typically playing basketball from 7 to 8 p.m. on Fridays. So we can also use that personalized information. And we can also even go further and say, we know what running looks like for this person, or we know what soccer looks like for this person. So we can continue to personalize the models, but there is a level of generalizability of, soccer kind of looks like soccer for a lot of people. There might be a few variations of it, but we can kind of generalize between people and understand what's going on.
Yeah, you think about all the applications for it, and it really does connect in with a lot of episodes we've had this season, which we're trying to make some connections with other probably healthcare adjacent areas. We keep referring to them that way, but like fitness is one of them, nutrition, weight loss, mental health, sleep management, things that aren't really at the core of traditional healthcare services, but are being talked about more and more, especially through partnerships with digital health partners. What about like where those opportunities are? What do you see? What are you seeing for opportunities to partner between a provider, a hospital, or even a workplace, an employer plan with a company like Whoop to kind of address some of these? Is that a direction that makes sense, I guess, first off? And then what are you seeing? Or like, I guess, where's the biggest opportunity among some of these other like adjacent areas?
We're seeing this move towards more functional health, preventative health. And so we're seeing people put more emphasis on things like exercise, sleep, nutrition, fitness, social connectedness. And, wearables capture a lot of this information already. Wearables are great at tracking sleep. They're great at tracking fitness and exercise. And so I think it fits in really well to that sort of healthcare trend of focusing more on these lifestyle behaviors. Wearables are this 24/7, 365 companion that are measuring these key metrics that play a huge role in functional health. They're providing objective measures here. The thing that's really important here is something that Zane said earlier is if a patient is engaging in their health in this way, I think it's really important for providers to sort of meet them there and participate in their health in this way. So wearables are never going to replace the sort of high precision, high fidelity medical equipment, but they're great at some of these other things. They're great at tracking sleep. They're great at tracking exercise, steps, fitness. So I think sort of, meeting in the middle there. And then the other piece I'll say is that the line actually between consumer devices and medical devices is continuing to get much more blurry. So we're seeing these products that are called software as a medical device, where a specific feature within a consumer device is And I think that's a space where we'll continue to see the lines between healthcare and consumer devices continue to blur. And it's important that we really work together and bridge that divide. Otherwise, we're going to be, creating insights in the wearable device, and then they're going to be falling flat in the healthcare space. So making sure that there are pathways and that healthcare providers understand the data that we're producing and the limitations and the strengths of the data, and so that they can incorporate that into their clinical practice is super important.
You just described everything that we want to happen. I think that's the state we want to see, and any step we get in that direction, like we're cheerleading for, we're celebrating. So I love that you connected so many dots there. Which maybe that's the answer to this final question we have for you, Torey. But I would love to hear what you think. What does give you hope? I mean, I think it's safe to say just that thought and that vision gives Zane and I hope for where healthcare can head here. What gives you hope for the future of healthcare in our country?
It's a difficult time right now. It's a trying time with cuts to government funding for medical research. A lot of the breakthroughs that we see in digital health wearables are built on decades of research that are funded by institutions like the NIH. What keeps me hopeful here is that people are more engaged with their health than ever before. People are willing to download apps. They're willing to spend time engaging with their health. And that's super powerful. And I think wearables are in a key position here to be that companion for people as they try to understand and navigate their health. I think if we think about what are the important pieces for preventative health, it's getting good exercise, sleep, good nutrition. That's a place where wearables can play a big role. We're seeing all those great shifts in healthcare right now, moving from largely reactive care to more proactive care. We're seeing, all of those P's of healthcare, so participatory, preventative, precision, all of those things. That's what really gives me hope. I think there are technology breakthroughs that are going to be coming sort of on a much more frequent basis, especially with some of these larger foundational models, and the pace of innovation right now and the rate at which people are engaging with their health is just really going to set up for, a beautiful sort of revolution in the next few years.
I love it.
Any final thoughts, Zane?
I don't think so. I think I don't want to overspeak what Torey already shared with us. I'm excited for where this is going.
We'll double that. We'll each +1 that. Torey, such a pleasure to have you. Not only to give us the current state, but the future state. We love seeing where things can go. And we appreciate you diving so deep with us, helping us understand what's possible and what is being done right now to help address this line between healthcare and consumer devices. So on behalf of our audience, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Well, I can already see we're going to have you guys back to hear where we go next.
100%.
That would be great.